Hey you, do you want to learn how to paint a soft glowing watercolor deer without overworking your layers or making muddy colors? If so, stay tuned because this video is all about it. Not only I'm going to be painting in real time this deer with you, but I will show you my technique to create soft and vibrant transitions without running in muddy colors or an overworked painting. Are you ready to join? So the first thing that I'm doing is getting the deer wet. And I always recommend starting the first layer with a wet on wet technique, meaning that you're applying wet paint over a wet surface. This is the perfect way to get very soft and smooth transitions. And if you're making any mistakes, don't worry, the first layer just counts barely. It's only for you to map out where to put your highlights and where to apply your midtones. And obviously, I'm just talking for myself. This is the way I paint, and I find that the first layer is very freeing. You shouldn't be thinking too much about it. Just enjoy it because it's the most fun part of a painting. So, what am I doing here? I am basically giving a color to the white fur. And that color for me is a mix of primary red magenta and cobalt blue. I'm using a mix of Holbein paints and My Merry Blue watercolors, and the reason is because My Merry Blue watercolors tend to disperse on a wet surface very fast, while Holbeins, they just stay where you put them, and I find that the perfect way in between is actually mixing them together. And here's my thinking process on how to tackle this deer color-wise. You can see that the fur has a warm tone, so that's going to be my midtones. So the colors I would reach out for in my palette are basically like any kind of primary yellow. I also use transparent yellow because this one has like a very strong kick to it, and I like to use it when I'm painting warm subjects. I'm also using primary red magenta, both for cool tones and for warm tones. I feel like this one creates very vibrant mixes. And obviously, to warm up that fur, I will be using burnt sienna or transparent Mars red. So how am I going to contrast this overall local color, which is basically a color gradient that goes between yellow and red, so yellow, orange, red. I will do this by choosing some cool colors on the other side of the color wheel. I'm going to apply a very thin layer of blue, and also for the white fur under the neck of the deer, I'll be using a mix of purple. I am all for wet on wet techniques. I love it. That's the way that I feel like it expresses my style the best. And I'm wondering, what is your style? Do you have a favorite technique? Do you have a favorite stage in your painting? If so, let me know in the comments below. Now that we have mapped all our highlights, we need to start thinking about our warm colors. And there you have it, your first warm brush stroke. So now you need to be extra careful because you have those blue and purple tones and you're putting down the warmer colors. It's so easy to make a muddy mix on the paper at this stage. You're putting down warm tones and you already have some blue on this deer. So if this yellow is going to touch the blue, obviously it will create green, and this deer is anything but green. I am carefully avoiding those blues and purples with my brush, and I apply the paint in very gentle brush strokes. Basically gonna keep putting down my yellows for all the white areas you can see pretty much on this deer. After that, I will go in with some orange to intensify the color. So the orange will be a mix of primary yellow, transparent yellow, and primary red magenta with burnt sienna or transparent Mars red, whichever you have on your palette. I sometimes like to use a fan brush to help the paint mix together smoothly. It holds little to no water, so you don't go in your painting with extra water and you don't risk to create a bloom using this brush. This is a very handy dandy little guide that I recommend you in case you ever come across it or you feel like you don't know whether to buy it or not. It's actually very useful. Now I'm still working wet on wet, and I'm going to intensify the previous layer of yellow that I put down before. This is a very clear example of what I mean by not creating muddy colors. How are you not going to create those muddy colors? You can see I'm painting in gradient. That's what I like to call it, which means I first applied yellow, like plain yellow, then I went over it with a more interesting kind of yellow. Now it's even more intense, which means that I'm going in with the shade of orange. And after that, I will go in with the shade of brown. It's actually not pure brown, but it's also a mix of orange, yellow, and a little touch of blue. Next, I'm going to start adding some details, and I'm using primary red magenta for the mouth, the nose, and the nostril of this deer. Now it's time to move on to the ears, and I will be tackling them the same exact way I used to do it before, because again, this is how you keep your colors clean. I will be starting with the lightest color, and I will be gradually increasing the color temperature that I'm using. And I'm sorry if I'm skipping ahead sometimes in this video, but I wanted to keep the pace a little faster so it's not a super boring, extra long video. If you need some extra time, I would encourage you to pause it and catch up with your painting. I know the water is drying for you too on the page if you're following along. It's not that easy to stay on top of it, so pause the video if you need to. You can even go back and look at it or go next and see what's coming up next so that you are prepared with the supplies that you're going to need. But don't worry, I'm always using the same colors anyway, so you should be good with that. Many times you're going to see me softening the edges with this damp brush. I don't like to change my brush too much when I paint. I'm kind of a lazy painter, I would say. So if you are a lazy painter too, just like I am, what you can do is you clear your brush from the paint that it's holding, and then you squeeze out all the water. So you open up the bristles and you can fan through the painting to just, make everything looking smoother. This is a rather large painting. It's a 16 by 12 inches. Every time before putting down a new layer of paint, I need to make sure that the paper is still wet. How do I do this? I find that the back of my hand is one of the most sensitive parts of my hand to check on the paper, so that's why you see me sometimes gently touch the paper with the back of my hand. Here I switched to a smaller brush. This is a Da Vinci Cosmotop Spin number 3, and I'm going in finally with medium dark tones to push back some parts of the ear. So we're going to start to intensify those colors even more, getting closer to our darks. Putting the darkest darks in is also one of my favorite parts. It's really satisfying to finally see this painting come into life. It's a little bit like sculpting, and now your painting is not appearing flat anymore. Now I'm on to the other ear, and I will do the same exact things. Here you can see that my brush was loaded with a bunch of different colors. You can see yellow, you can see red, and the burnt sienna or transparent Mars red. I don't remember exactly what I used. I think I made a mix of them both. And I'm not doing much. I'm just putting down the color and observing what it does. More color, more darks, and pushing that part back. And stay away from the highlights. Don't cover the entire ear with red, yellow paint, because otherwise it will be a very flat painting. The thing with watercolor, especially if you're working with wet on wet, the paint tends to dry out lighter, and that's called the drying shift. You need to be aware of that, especially when you're painting with your yellow colors. Yellow is a color that has a very light value tone. So in one hand, it's very easy to paint with yellow because it's not an overwhelming color. But on the other hand, if you're painting something that has an intense color, it gets kind of tricky to gauge when this yellow is on the right intensity scale, because if it's too light, then this yellow is not going to support your oranges or your red the way it should be. It appears too weak, and once you put on your midtones with the orange reds, that yellow, like I said, it's just too weak, and you would have to go over what you painted with a new layer. And you must be careful when you do this and choose a transparent color. That's why transparent yellow is perfect for glazing to fill in that gap. Now I'm going to paint the eye, so down to the small details. And I start with the lightest tones. First, the highlights are blue, like I said before, and then I will paint the pupil with a red color mix. Color theory applied. The cool part tends to step back a little bit, and when you paint something with some red pigments in it, that can be any kind of like Perol red and burnt umber. Whenever you use red, those red colors tend to push the object forward. It looks closer to you. Now I'm basically intensifying the creases between the neck of the deer. And again, I'm working wet on wet, and I'm using a mix of red and blue, which gives this kind of off purple, which is perfect for just some shadowing color. And here I made a very dark mix of blue and red. I believe this is primary blue cyan from primary blue and pearl red, which gives me, again, a very intense dark. I'm using it to intensify the darkest part of the eye and the nose too. These dark accents are what make a painting special. They tie it together, they give it that extra dimension. Now you can see the darkest part of the nose, it's sticking out quite a bit, while the lightest part is receding in the back. Now I'm painting the background wet on wet. I'm using quite a large brush. This is a size 24, and I'm using a combination of French ultramarine, primary red magenta, and burnt sienna. I absolutely love the combination these three colors can create together, especially this warm burnt sienna and purple shade that I'm putting down right now. So if you're painting along, please make sure to have fun, especially when you do the background, because it's supposed to be fun. Watch the paint flow and mix together, play with that water, try different color combinations, try something new if you can. For me personally, I find it very relaxing just to watch the paint move on the paper, and I also enjoy tilting the paper quite a bit to help the paint flow. 1 minute after painting the background, once the paint is starting to dry, I will add some splatter just for fun. It gives the painting that dreamy looking effect that I really like, and I often recreate in many of my animal paintings. What I did next is that I let the paint completely dry, and I went back to it the day after to remove the mask and fluid. I didn't really like how thick those masked hair looked like. I thinned them out. Same I did for the spots on the back of the deer. They were too white compared to the deer. I basically just reactivated the paint on the fur and dragged that dirty water over those hair to make it look more organic. Then I added my signature to the painting and it was done. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. That really helps me a lot as a new creator here on YouTube. So, I'll see you next time. Bye!